Hey guys, G2 put on a pretty good masterclass and an understanding of the current draft dynamic on patch 14.1 and the way things are flowing with the game states. And it really shows in how many options they're giving themselves in these drafts. So I wanted to take this time and really quickly go over some examples of this, right? I always advocate for making sure to understand and have a conscious look at every champion and keep thinking about counter picks that are going to stay across champions, as well as thinking about each role and the pool of champions in its meta to allow yourself to understand how your picks should flow out. In this case, G2 are 2-0 and they're on blue side. And although they have great gameplay, of course, this is definitely supplemented by having excellent drafting dynamics in order to set themselves up for success. The reason for this is the opener with the Nico B1. I believe blinding mid right now is actually pretty okay in the sense that as long as all the insane prow picks are gone, right? So in this case, Rumble, permabanned. This would be a B1 Rumble every time because he's just objectively really broken and he's arguably a flex pick at this moment, but definitely excelling in both everywhere he's going. Even jungle, it's not even that bad. So that's something to keep in mind. With LeBlanc's kind of similar thing. She's always been a champion to just B1 and you have pressure in mid. And then when you do that, you're just really strong and that's just how it goes. So Nico B1 is strong in this case because there's not very many champions that are good in mid right now, right? Like when we've been watching all the games, like it's really just the Nico Azir show. And then maybe a couple of extra picks like if they're banned for whatever reason, and then the things like the Orianna comes out, or we just reviewed the Xerath Cook that came out, right? But there's not really much else in terms of innovation there. It's going to be pretty standard, maybe a bit of a Kali as well, but really that's that, right? On paper, Rogue's picks here, Varus and Xin Zhao, are actually really solid, right? 2 priority picks. Ashe is still up, which you could argue, and still available. I think there's some other ADs. I believe the whole pool is open. Oh, no. I take that back. So Kalista, Tristana are gone, but there's still a lot of the pool open. So Lucian is open. Ashe is open. Aphelios is open. There's other options that you can even explore that teams are not exploring as much right now still. Like, I still think Jinx is pretty good on the patch, but it's something that teams are not exploring right now. There's probably other combinations. Like Caitlyn lanes there's no reason for them not to be strong. Aphelios is good and is being used. There's still the same tech picks that we can be using but are not. As well as the Hansam and Draven, of course. But Varus would be one of those champions that would hedge against that. So where this leads into the B2B3 is that the Trundle. I've been selling this shit for the last few videos. It's been really strong. Let's identify let's tie it back to the beginning, right? The game state and what champions need in order to succeed in this current meta. There's so much fighting right now because of grubs, and there's just so many more objectives to constantly be around when you're a jungler right now. So with the reduced emphasis on ganking as well, there's going to be a ton as a jungler that you're going to be playing for, and the champions that are going to do the best are going to be the ones that are great at fighting or have great matchups into the other champions. Trundle's a little bit of both, right? Because he is a champion that has one of the strongest stat checking ability. Like his whole ability is to just be a cuck. And he's doing a great job of that in this meta because any champion that would be AD and he doesn't get his ankles broken by, he's just going to win. And that's the same idea here. Xin Zhao is not a real blind here because Trundle actually turbo stomps him. It's actually not even close, right? They do the same thing. Trundle just stat checks him. And that's going to show in this matchup. And this is a good innovation, like I said, from G2, because I identify that this is a champion that meets the needs of the meta, and is relatively blindable and can work into most compositions. So I legit don't see a reason why this champion isn't picked more often at this moment. Pair that with the Aphelios, and you actually leave yourself up with a lot of options in support as well. So with this in mind, this is the most blindable mid laner in the game right now, I would say. I would give it like a tie with Azir, depending on what your playstyle is. This is a turbo stomp counter pick that is also able to do any comp, and you have an AD carry that counter picks and neutralizes this matchup, and you can play into any composition. G2's 3 picks not only gain advantages on Rogue, but they can pivot their composition any way they want on 4-5. This is why this is already super strong. Is this Azir? Okay, very standard because it would have been banned on phase 2 if they didn't pick it here because there's not really many other mid laners they could go for. So Rogue, confused. They have to, if they opt to dig into the support pool, they have to actually dig into both sides of the support pool, because ironically, I think G2 could probably go both siege comps and front to back comps and engage comps. So that's a little bit of a concern. And with this, like they've only opted to take one from both options, but this effectively does nothing, because there's a lot of champions that you can just still pair with both of these, right? You could go Rakan here, you could go even Lulu here is fine in a lot of matchups depending on what's happening, right? You still have Leona, you still have like a lot of engaged champions as well. Like there's no reason to worry if you're G2, and that's what basically downplays the pressure from these phase 2 bans. G2 does the same thing. Varus is still relatively flexible too, but there's fewer combos, I would say, that would work as well. But it's a similar dynamic in this case. They reveal support on 4, which they should, because I don't think you should pick top 4 here. And then G2 blind Jax as well as Rel, right? So they've opted for an aggressive option because they can respond to the support on 4. So they pushed themselves and gave themselves as much leverage as absolutely possible, and then they lock it in for their 4-5. And what's the response? Cassante, which is a champion they could have blinded anyway. So if that was their goal, I think especially on 4-5, Rogue probably didn't flex hard enough in terms of what options they had remaining. If they're going to pick Cassante anyway, to be honest with you, you should have picked it on a 4, because then support counter pick would have been more viable. And I'm not sure if that's the conversations they were having as a team while on stage, right? Because if you're going to blind Cassante, you're probably going to get something like a Jax anyway, or you're going to get another just fighter type champion. Like they were just going to pick Gwen, and then you're just going to be weak sided anyway. So it's not going to change too much in that dynamic. So I would have, this is a missed opportunity, because support's one of those underrated pools that always have a very wide selection of options that you can go for. That's not really being utilized as much as we would like. So then G2 probably could have picked something else, and then Rogue could have picked a really nice R5 champion to counter. So let's say they see that it's Rel or Leona or something like that. You could go Varus Braum, and this game is over for G2. I'm not going to lie. Rogue's just going to win because it's going to be Impenetrable Fortress. It's still kind of the same, but you know, the strengths and weaknesses of each champion are really well defined when it comes to these counter picks, and that's what I wanted to highlight here.